Good day and welcome to the webinar on why you should vote no on South Dakota's Initiated Measure 25. My name is Nathan Sanderson. I'm the Executive Director of the South Dakota Retailers Association, 4,000 member-wide organization who, along with a number of other organizations in South Dakota, have organized to oppose IM25. Our presenter today is Steve Westra. He's the chairman of South Dakotans Against Higher Taxes, which is leading the opposition to IM25. Steve is the president of Haig Companies in Sioux Falls. He's a former state legislator, and he served as the assistant majority leader in the South Dakota House. Now, before we begin, a couple of notes. There is a note-taking version of the PowerPoint presentation that can be printed out from the handouts area on the side of your screen. If you look, there should be an orange icon with a link to a handout that you can print out. The phones of all the attendees are muted, and so hopefully we won't hear any background noise. However, there will be a Q&A at the conclusion of the presentation. So at any time during the presentation, to ask a question, find the chat box, which should be located near your handout section. Go to that panel and then type your question into the chat box, hit send, and then at the end of the presentation, I will read that question aloud, and then Steve will provide the answer. So I'd like to turn the presentation over to Steve Westra, again, chairman of the South Dakotans Against Higher Taxes.
Well, thank you, Nathan, and thank you to the South Dakota retailers for this opportunity to come before you on behalf of the South Dakotans Against Higher Taxes and to tell you why we are opposed to Initiated Measure 25 and why we would ask for all of your members to vote no this November on Initiated Measure 25. It's going to be a short presentation, but I think it will be a worthwhile presentation, and also will be available afterwards for any questions that any of you have or anything else that I can clarify as we go through the information here. So the first thing that I guess is really important that we want to make sure that everybody fully understands is what exactly is Initiated Measure 25 and what is its intention. So this coming November, voters are going to decide the fate of Initiated Measure 25, and it's essentially a $35 million tax increase on South Dakotans. And what it would do is impose a $1 tax increase on each pack of cigarettes in the state, as well as a 57% increase on smokeless and other tobacco products, with a goal of creating a new government fund for the state's post-secondary technical institutes. And as we continue on through, we are going to, or I will take some time to explain the reasons why South Dakotans Against Higher Taxes are urging all of you to vote no come this November. So we talk here about burdening hardworking South Dakotans. And essentially what IM25 is going to require is adult smokers to shoulder the entire burden on this new $35 million tax. And I think it's fair to say, and we would all agree, that these consumers are already struggling to make ends meet. And this measure is only going to make things worse for the many hardworking South Dakotans in our state. IM25 dramatically grows government spending with tobacco taxes, which have been proven to be a declining revenue source year after year here in the state. And one of the things I want to point out, even in the most current fiscal year here in the state of South Dakota, when you look at revenues are up across the board in every area in the state except for tobacco tax sales revenues. And I want to make sure that everybody fully understands that we are then creating a new tax entity on a declining revenue source. So really, what does it do to many of you within the retailers? It hurts small businesses. Tobacco sales make up a significant portion of sales in convenience stores, and should it pass, many retailers could be forced out of businesses, which is going to cause a loss of more than 400 jobs. IM25 dramatically grows government spending, with a revenue source that declines over time. And prior tobacco tax hikes in South Dakota and other states have failed to raise the revenue projected by their backers. As tobacco tax revenues drop, additional tax increases or cuts in services are always needed to make up that shortfall. Increased crime, something that we believe that initiated Measure 25 will lead to is more cross-border sales of cigarettes, or is what we like to call black market sales. Initiated Measure 25 is going to lead to more of these illegal cross-border sales of cigarettes, and it's going to result in more people purchasing tobacco products from Native American reservations, the internet, or through illicit or an increase in illicit sales. And as we point out here on this slide right now, a criminal enterprise can make more than $1 million by smuggling just one semi-load of cigarettes into the state. Now, currently, I want to back up a little bit and just reiterate, under the current tax in the state of South Dakota, an individual pays $1.53 on a pack of cigarettes. What initiated Measure 25 is attempting to do is to change that to $2.53. And when we look at the states surrounding South Dakota and what they are currently paying for taxes, a couple examples I just want to point out to everybody out there listening is, in North Dakota, for instance, the current tax is 44 cents on a pack of cigarettes. In Wyoming, for instance, it's 60 cents. Nebraska, it's 64 cents. And in the state of Iowa, it's $1.34. So we have here up on the screen more reasons that we talk about to oppose initiated Measure 25. And I want to just hit on a few of them. And one of the main ones I want to talk about is the disadvantage it has over other post-secondary students. So as initiated Measure 25 raises taxes to fund the state's 4 technical institutes, the other post-secondary institutions, such as the state's universities and any of the private colleges in South Dakota, are completely shut out of this new tax money. And unlike other state-funded scholarship programs, under the proposed initiated Measure 25, there's absolutely zero requirements that any of these graduates of the South Dakota Post-Secondary Technical Institutes must work in the state of South Dakota after accepting the reduced tuition that's going to be paid for by the South Dakota taxpayers. And finally on here, it was already rejected by the legislature, and that happened earlier this year. The South Dakota legislature rejected a similar proposal by Speaker Mark Nicholson. It was House Bill 1274, and it was overwhelmingly defeated in the committee. And I like to point that out because I believe that the South Dakota legislature totally and fully understand the fact that they did not like picking winners and losers when it came to our educational system. So initiated Measure 25 raises the taxes to fund the state's 4 technical schools, but it completely ignores all of the other important educational needs that we have right here in the state of South Dakota. So for instance, preschools, K through 12 schools, and any of the four-year universities are completely shut out of any of this new money going forward. So who's next? If initiated Measure 25 passes, I think, and I can predict pretty clearly, that there's going to be new initiated measures in the future targeting new pots of money. And we cite some examples here on the screen of what those might be. We never really know what they're going to be, but when you first of all come out with something like what initiated Measure 25 is, and you depend it on a declining revenue stream, we all can be assured that we're going to have to raise taxes in some other area. And the possibilities could be alcohol, for instance, a soda pop tax increase, a corporate or personal tax increase, financial services, which could range from anywhere from banks, credit unions, or credit card companies, to medical providers, or many, many more that are out there. So we're definitely within this measure singling out a small group of people to pay for everything. And more importantly, it's an extremely unreliable source of revenue that's actually in a declining mode here in the state of South Dakota. So for these reasons, I just want to point out here that there's absolutely nothing in Initiated Measure 25 that stops these new tax revenues from ever being diverted away from the technical schools and right into the general fund. And the example that I think many of you might be seeing out there in the marketplace today, whether on TV ads or in mailers that are coming out from our group, all you have to do is just look at what happened with video lottery here in the state. So there's a reason that we say Initiated Measure 25 is a blank check that we can't afford. And there's multiple examples that I could give of where we have seen dollars repeatedly, time after time, being diverted away from where they were intended and ending up going right into the general fund or going or used for other purposes within the state. And we currently actually see that as well within the current tobacco tax that we have. So under the current tobacco tax that is out there in the state of South Dakota, the first $30 million is directed to the general fund, and the next $5 million goes to tobacco prevention. And that alone, in the last couple of years, the legislature already diverted $500,000 of that $5 million away from tobacco prevention or education and drove that towards mosquito control within the cities here in the state of South Dakota. So it is not something that hasn't happened in the past, and in fact, it's just the opposite. It's something that continually happens in our state, which again is the reason that we're asking on behalf of the South Dakotans Against Higher Taxes, and we're asking the members of the South Dakota retailers to vote no this November on Initiated Measure 25. I do want to just point out one last slide that I have up currently that you all should be able to see. And it really then, it shows the state of South Dakota, reiterates what I've already commented on with regards to the current tax being set at $1.53 and where the proposed tax would be under Initiated Measure 25 of $2.53. But I think you will see that it will definitely put our state at a competitive disadvantage and will only drive our residents to go across the border to be purchasing their tobacco products in the future. And the thing I want to point out on that as well is the fact that when a lot of these people do go across the border, they're not purchasing just their own tobacco products, but rather they're purchasing fuel for their car, they're purchasing other grocery products, they're purchasing a pack of gum, whatever the item might be, which then also hurts our state from a sales tax standpoint as well, and we see additional decline in that as well. So with that being said, I would strongly encourage a no vote this November on Initiated Measure 25. We're very proud of the work that we've done up to this point with the coalition members that we brought online or brought on board with us to help move the No on IM25 forward. And I'm proud of the South Dakota retailers and the support that they have brought forward with it as well. I also just want to point out that both the South Dakota Republican Party and the South Dakota Democratic Party have come on board as well as all strong no members. And I think when you look at the political climate that we have out in our country today, when we have both parties coming together and agreeing on something, I think it really goes to show how bad the policy is for Initiated Measure 25. We also have the South Dakota Petroleum and Propane Marketers, and I'm also proud to say that we also have the South Dakota Education Association is on board as well as urging all of you to vote no this November. So with that, I will turn it back over to Nathan. If there's any questions or anything that I can clear up or that you need more information on, I'd be more than happy to answer any of those questions.
All right, thanks, Steve. We've got several questions that have come in, and I think you've touched on a few of these. And so if you could maybe flesh those answers out just a little bit more. And so first question is, this is from, all these questions are from participants who've submitted them. I'm concerned if people start buying cigarettes in another state, they'll take other business with them. Isn't this potentially a loss in sales tax revenue to the state of South Dakota?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for that, for the first question, Nathan, and absolutely, it very much is. And as I mentioned, you know, it's almost a compounding effect. When people do cross the border, they start purchasing many other items versus just their tobacco products. You know, we can cite examples of that here in the state of South Dakota as well when we've changed our habits. And I would not be surprised if we were to start to see large tobacco outlets just across the border. We see that already with regards to other industries here surrounding where I'm located currently in the city of Sioux Falls. But for instance, it doesn't take much to go about a half a mile into the state of Iowa and to see almost a Las Vegas style casino. And unfortunately, the state of South Dakota loses all of those revenues. And they're all driven into a competing state of ours. So the answer to that is yes.
Okay, very good. A question kind of along the same lines. So if tobacco use declines as a result of this tax increase, and then is it likely that tobacco tax revenue would also decline as a result of that? And if so, how would that money be replaced for tech schools? And I've got, I think, an addendum question onto this, Eve. So if tobacco use declines as a result of this, does tobacco revenue decline? And if so, how would that be replaced?
Well, the answer to that is quite simple, that yes, everything's going to decline. And that's why we posed the question that I presented within the slide of what is next? I think it is fair to say that we know that we're seeing it already in the state of South Dakota. We see it in the most current fiscal year as well, that we're seeing it decline. And it's just a matter of time before we're going to have to look at other products out there. And that's why we brought up the possibility of being an alcohol tax or a sugary drink tax, a corporate income tax. When we create something like this, and we're essentially picking, might I add, winners and losers from the educational standpoint in South Dakota, because there's only the 4 technical schools that are able to participate in this. But at some point, we're going to have to make up the difference. And what that next tax is, that's really up to the state to determine what we are going to go after the next time, to determine who's going to fill that gap or hole on the tax loss.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions on a similar topic, and so I'm going to kind of blend those two together. Question is, what is the stated use that the tech schools will have for this money? What I mean is, how would the tech schools use this money if it were given to them by the legislature?
It's a great question, and one that I think is the reason why we talked that initiated Measure 25 is the blank check that we can't afford, because that's essentially what we're doing with this $20 million that is essentially being handed over to the technical school board and the 4 schools, and we are letting them decide what to do with those dollars.
Okay. Question kind of on the opposite side. So isn't IM25, or doesn't IM25 accomplish 2 things? 1, provide more money for tech schools, and 2, discourage smoking?
Well, let me describe on the first one, that it drives more money to the technical schools. That's exactly right. But it ignores all of the other important educational needs that we have right now in the state. And as I mentioned, preschools, K through 12 schools, and any of the other 4-year universities in the state are completely shut out of this new tax money. And the thing I really want to point out is when you look at the system with even our 4-year universities, our enrollment is down, while our enrollment at the 4 technical schools is up. So if we were going to look at it that way, what are we going to do to try and offset the declining enrollment at the 4-year universities?
Okay, here's a little bit more of a broad-based question. In South Dakota, don't most fees and or taxes that are on a specific group of businesses or people benefit that group? This seems like it's taxing a group that is completely unrelated to where the money is going.
Yes, would be the answer to that. I would completely agree with that.
Okay. Question on here. I'd like to post some No on 25 information in my business. Where can I get those materials?
That very, very simple. I would ask that they work with the South Dakota retailers on that as well. Make sure that you're communicating with whoever it is that your representative is, and we will make sure that we get that information forwarded on to us here with the No on IM25 campaign, and we'll make sure that we get that information to you as quickly and promptly as possible.
Okay, and so this is Nathan. I'll just add, let's have individuals call our main line, 605-224-5050, 605-224-5050, and we will get that information to you. Not so much the question, I think, is a rhetorical question. Did you say both the Republican and Democratic parties are opposed to IM25? I didn't think they could agree on anything.
I did say that, and that is a good point. But I think when they do agree on something, I think it goes to show what bad policy initiated Measure 25 is. I think for the most part, and it goes right back to as well as having the South Dakota Education Association on board as well, is it really comes down to picking winners and losers within our educational system. And the taxes that are raised through initiated Measure 25 only go to the state's 4 technical schools. It ignores all of the other educational needs that we have in the state of South Dakota.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I think that exhausts all of the questions that we've received from the participants on the call. I would note before we close here that this webinar has been recorded. It will be emailed out later today to anyone who registered for the program, and then also available on the South Dakota Retailers Association website. That's www.sdra.org, sdra.org. With that, thanks again to Steve Westra, who is the chairman of South Dakotans Against Higher Taxes, for leading this webinar, again, in opposition to initiated Measure 25. Thanks to everyone for participating, and have a great day.